explicit consent. But I guess I would ask, are you pro-life like all throughout like the entire like trimesters, or do you make any sort of exceptions?
Well, like I mean, like I would make like exceptions um to like serious things like SA or like to like that manner where they didn't have like a choice to begin with. But my argument in response to you guys saying like the fetus wouldn't have a right to the mother's resources without her explicit consent. Would that not be happening like when they consent to do the act of reproduction? Because when you consent to do that act, you know that one of the repercussions could be like having a child. So in my
Sure.
opinion, or in my defense, I guess, in my argument would be that you are consenting to that fetus when you decide to do the act of procreation.
Sure, you can make the argument that by consenting to intercourse, you acknowledge certain risks, but by consenting to intercourse, you don't also like consent to not having an abortion or like sign away your rights to having an abortion. You just acknowledge that there is a possibility that you will become pregnant, not necessarily that you're not allowed to have an abortion.
Well, like, why do you look at an abortion as a right versus a privilege?
Because I don't think the fetus has a claim to the mother's body or a right to the mother's resources. Therefore, I think if the mother doesn't want the fetus to use her resources, she shouldn't be forced to. So I don't think it should be a privilege that is only like exclusive to certain scenarios, because I don't think the fetus has a right to the mother's body.
Well, if it
You
should
got
only,
dad
I honestly
issues
find it
real.
very unethical to force someone to sustain pregnancy and go through birth.
well, like back to what I don't believe, like I don't look at it as being forced because of like them consenting to like do the act of like
May I
intercourse,
define
knowing that it
force?
becomes force would be like to do something against your will, or to do something without
Right.
consent.
So if you are denying someone specific access to a type of health care so that they can terminate their pregnancy, you are forcing them to sustain pregnancy. So you're making them do it against their will. And I find that to be a very unethical position.
But I believe that would be simply just a repercussion of your actions. Like if you're choosing to do this, knowing that, like if I choose to put my
So
hand
should we not
in
be
fire and I
allowed
know I
to
could get
have
burned,
STD treatments?
well, you're not consenting to go and have an STD or something. They should tell you that they are
Why?
going to have STD prior to that.
Well,
So when you have
but what if your
like
partner is unaware they have an STD? You know there could be a slight risk that you could get an STD. Why are you allowed to treat that, but you're not allowed to terminate pregnancy?
because with pregnant or with STDs versus pregnancies, STDs is something that you should be getting checked for regularly and be like not spreading or not giving to other people. But when it comes to babies or something, that's kind of like
This is
the
all
meaning of
about
life, it's
your argument,
reproduction.
the consequences of your actions. And you're saying the consequence of you engaging in sex and getting pregnant is you have to sustain said pregnancy. But
Yeah,
why is the consequence of you having sex and getting an STD not the same where you have to sustain that STD?
because when you have sex and get an STD, that's a disease that inflicts your body that can like cause you like a bunch of different like things like that's for life, and like it's not something that's
So
the
can
same as
pregnancy.
bringing new life. Yeah, but
So
in
can
pregnancy,
pregnancy.
you're bringing new life to term. You're bringing like
So it
more life,
really
like to.
doesn't have anything to do with like the consequences of your actions.
No, it does, because if you are choosing to go and do an act that you can have the baby, how is that then
You're
not
just
like
special pleading. You're just
reciprocal?
special pleading. You only want to say consequences of your actions when it comes to pregnancy, when it comes to no other action.
No, when it comes to many actions, I just believe when it comes to disease, it's a lot different than when it comes to like a fetus. I don't believe
Yeah,
a
I don't think
fetus and
she's
the
Right,
saying that
disease
a
are
that's
the
the
same
fetus.
point.
thing.
Yeah, I don't think she's saying that a fetus is equivalent to a disease. She's just saying that if you're saying by consenting to intercourse, you consent to pregnancy, you would have to keep the same like framework for when you consent to intercourse, you consent to an STD. But obviously, this doesn't make sense because when you consent to intercourse, you're not consenting to an STD, nor are you consenting to a pregnancy. So she's not saying that an STD is a fetus or that they're similar, just that your logic is sort of inconsistent.
I understand, but when you bring up the analogy or the relation to the STD, that's where it kind of like, I guess, sets me off track a bit. But I get what you're saying with the whole consent thing, and then you're not consenting to have an STD, but you could have that. But my point, like in response to that, would be like when you're like going and doing the act of like reproduction, and you can have another child, like you know that that's coming from that. It's not necessarily something that's like a disease or will inflict your body or is a risk, but is something that like you can
Pregnancy
bring to
does
term.
have a negative effect on a person's body.
And you don't believe abortion would either?
Not equivalent to pregnancy, no. When you have
Abortion is 10
you
times
don't get
safer than pregnancy.
you don't get gestational diabetes. When you have an abortion, it's very rare that there's any kind of hemorrhaging rather than birth. Like we could go tit for tat on the health risks of pregnancy when it comes to abortion, and pregnancy and birth are more damaging to your health.
Okay, yeah, I understand where you guys are coming from on that. And then my question for you guys would be, where do you necessarily like draw the line then? Do you believe it should be up to like a heartbeat or up to X amount of months, or do you believe like it should just be the woman's right, like whenever?
I would say consciousness, but hopefully Austin is not in here.
Yay, I would say
think you should be
the
able
same
to
thing.
terminate your pregnancy at any time, but it doesn't necessarily mean that will result in the death of the fetus.
So then, if you would say consciousness, what would differentiate it then? Like if it would be a woman's right and like to her body and to her like resources and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
so when
Wouldn't
the
it
fetus
be a
reaches
woman's right to her?
consciousness, it's around the same time
Yeah.
that the fetus actually has viability and sentience. So if the mother chooses she no longer wants the pregnancy, she's still allowed to terminate the pregnancy, just not by using lethal means. So for example, she's allowed to get an induced labor, and because the fetus is viable, it will survive. So it won't be within lethal means, and she can still choose that she doesn't, want to be pregnant. But like pre-consciousness, then like she wouldn't really be able to do that, because even if she were to get an induced labor, the fetus wouldn't survive.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but you don't believe like, I guess, just kind of like the baby forming into like a, I guess, human form and having a heartbeat and having like, arms and legs and all of that. Like,
Well, I think a
different
heartbeat
stuff. You don't
and
believe
arm and
that.
legs are like arbitrary, and I don't see why they would like define when you get like rights or personhood. And if we were just looking at it in a basic sense, like you don't die when you lose a heartbeat, so I don't see why you would like start to be considered a person or like living once you gain the heartbeat, because you can have like, I don't know, what is it called? A heart. Fuck, I forgot what it was called.
Wait, a heart arrest. Wait, that's not the right word.
Cardiac arrest. Yeah,
Cardiac arrest.
that is what I was
And
looking for.
if you are giving all these qualities, do you permit an abortion prior to 6 weeks?
I personally don't believe like an abortion like should happen like ever, like in my opinion, but like that would just be like my beliefs. But it's just like part of it is religious, but I don't like to force my religion on anybody. But another part of it is just kind of my my own, I guess, like morals and values. Like I don't think it's like,
how it's ethical to force someone to sustain pregnancy.
well, I don't believe like in my opinion, the only time I believe it would be by force is if they didn't consent to having intercourse, or if they didn't consent, like in that sense, like in a sense of SA or in a sense of like, something like that.
I've already
Then I
defined
think that it
force,
would be
and you've
permitted.
actually agreed on the definition that it is against someone's will. So if someone does not want to be pregnant, why do you think it is ethical to make them sustain that pregnancy?
Because they chose to go have intercourse. Like it's not like,
I see. So you want to punish
I don't
people
believe
for
it's
having
punishing.
sex. Would you like me
No,
to
I don't.
define punishment?
I mean, you could define punishment, but I don't believe like that is necessarily punishment if you go and
You're giving them
have
a
sex and
penalty.
then a baby comes. Like I don't, and like for example, like if we were to use like even like a man too or something, if you were to have a baby and the man didn't want to have it but you wanted to have it, that man would still have to provide for that baby by paying child support or doing
He would not.
XYZ, and that
He
wouldn't
would
be
not.
punishing.
He would
Well, he
not.
could still be
A
forced to by
person
law.
can, no, he would not. He can actually rescind his parental rights and not have any obligations.
And how would that go about? How would that go through? How would that be just in
That is a
court of
current
law?
law.
So then how are so many people stuck paying child support if you can simply just rescind your right as a parent?
Because they signed a birth certificate, which means they accepted the parental obligation, so it's harder to get out of that parental obligation. It takes like a whole bunch of like legal fees and, you know, legal processes. But if you didn't sign the birth certificate, it would be different.
Well, then wouldn't it go back to not laying with a man until you lay with a man that would be a man that would stick around and would sign the birth certificate and would want to start?
I mean, no,
like,
not
happy, healthy
necessarily.
family with
Oh,
you?
should we give men a survey and then if they like don't follow through, then what?
Must score above
What do you,
70%.
it's not necessarily about giving like a survey and about following
I
through,
have
but
a
it's about
questionnaire that I'd
finding.
like you to fill out. If I get pregnant, will you abandon me? Please
No,
check
it's about.
one box. Like,
It's not about that. It's about finding a good partner to do something along with. Like
I mean,
I
even
don't
if you
know.
do
Like,
find a good
do you
partner,
think
there's
casual?
possibilities. No, but even if you do find a good partner, there's possibilities that during your pregnancy, your partner could die or like go into a coma or etc. And then what would you do? Like you found this good partner that was willing to have like children with you and accept parental obligation. And now they're no longer like in a state to do so. So it
Yeah,
wouldn't
but I
necessarily
believe.
even be about finding that.
Yeah, but that would be a rare scenario. That would be like a one-off scenario, like versus like that would be an exception to the rule, I guess. Like if you were to find someone, it's not likely that they're just gonna die or that they're just gonna often.
So
what if y'all just
and then
up?
all
so
pardon?
that's the point that we're trying to make is that when it comes to someone deciding if they want to sustain pregnancy or not, we should give them agency because they understand all the circumstances and conditions of their life. Where you just kind of want to apply a blanket law without really seeing the complexity.
I see some like I see the complexity in it, and this is why I said like in certain circumstances I believe it should be bypassed or I believe they should have the right to do so. But in the sense of like just
Do you know
going
what the
out and
number
like
one?
giving, sorry, what was that?
Do you know what the number one cause of maternal death is in the United States?
I'm not from the United States, but if I were to just make a guess, I would assume like maternal death isn't like death while like pregnant, but not like anything else, like them not doing it medically, correct?
mm-hmm.
Correct.
I guess like abuse or something like that, or like self-induced trying to like do it themselves outside
I
of
mean, close. Yeah. So it's homicide, and 2/3
homicide.
of those
Okay.
deaths are related to domestic violence. So, would you give an exception to someone who is the victim of domestic violence and fears for their life if they sustain pregnancy that they will die?
And they believe that they will sustain pregnancy because they will die due to their partner being abusive?
Correct. 1 in 6 women who are abused actually started being abused when pregnant.
I understand that, but I believe that would go back to like trying to choose a good partner, trying to choose someone that wouldn't be doing said things.
Like,
and I understand it's not the easiest thing, but
does feel like blaming.
Yeah, how can you know if
So
your partner is going to abuse you or not? Like you can pick like the most perfect man that you think is like the best. He opens the door for you, pays for everything, blah, 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 all these standards that he fits and all these criterias. And then he could still like abuse you.
Well, I mean, there's there's always a possibility in any relationship you get into, regardless of it being like.
I'm willing to bet that most women that ended up in abusive relationships like didn't start off their relationship expecting that. So
Well, no, I don't think like anybody wakes up and says, I'm going to pick an abuser. I'm going to pick someone that's just going to steal from me
But
or
that
do
was
this for me or do
just the
that to me.
statement
But
you make,
it's
that
still,
you should choose a better partner.
yeah. And if I would be able to extrapolate on that statement, I believe when it comes to like choosing a better partner, it's not about just you and in your head and what you feel. You should also go outside like resources, maybe go to your father or go to a different man in your family, go to your friends, go to other people and get, like their point of view, their like I guess perspective on the guy and their opinion on the
So
guy, and
I
to like
think
kind of vet
you
them out.
don't really understand domestic violence very well.
I understand that people can get into abusive relationships and that like domestic violence can happen, and I'm not negating that
Really,
or
what
trying to
does
minimize
domestic
it in
violence
any
do to
way.
your brain?
I don't know what answer you're looking for in this sense.
So there's actually ways that emotional, psychological, and physical violence affects someone's brain. When it comes to domestic violence, typically because of the sustained abuse, and one of the first things an abuser does is isolate their victim from all of their family and friends. So the fact that you said one of the first things they can do is go ask other family members tells me you don't really understand domestic violence. And typically someone who is the victim of domestic violence, the average attempts it takes to leave their abuser is 5. And that can be over the course of years. So it's not something that, you can just leave him. You can go do it on your own. You can go to your families. It's a very complex and complicated situation.
So then what I'm getting is like basically then both sides shouldn't be held accountable. It should only be one side then, is what I'm hearing from what you're saying.
What does that mean?
Basically, if you pick someone that's a poor choice, or you pick someone that's not a good suitor or not a good candidate or whatever, and even though you could have tried to vet them and and like get your family's like opinion on them and all that, you got isolated and separated from your family, separated from all these things, and you believe it's 100% just on the other side, and like you shouldn't reflect and
Yes,
say,
it is the
maybe I
abuser's
chose a bad
fault.
partner.
Yes,
Actually,
100. It is the abuser's fault.
why are we victim blaming?
I'm not.
I don't think
You
the
very
person being abused has any role in like
Yeah, like this is not
being
like
abused.
a 50-50 responsibility thing. Only the abuser is at fault.
No, I don't believe it should be a 50-50 responsibility thing, but I believe if you don't believe that it's just simply like a night and day thing, and like a
I mean,
switch
you
flips and
can
then they just become an abuser. Like there's
no,
red
you can
flags,
look
there's
at it from
different
a
things
different
like along the way
perspective
that you can
too, though,
notice.
to where we don't like victim blame. For example, let's say like one day you as a boyfriend like don't hold the door open for your girlfriend, and then she cheats on you with like 5 of your best friends. Do you think like after you get cheated on, people should be like, oh, well, you didn't hold the door for her, so like it's kind of your fault. Like I know she cheated on you, but you also played a part because you didn't hold the door. Obviously
No, it's not
not,
about.
because like
Let me respond to that exact scenario. That's perfect. It's not about me not holding the door or whatever scenario led to it. It's the fact that I decided to get into a long-term relationship with a woman that would do that over something so minimal. Did I know before we got into the relationship that she would do that over something so minimal? No. But it's my job as a human being to vet her,
to
to find out
pre-assume
if she's like
wait, to
worth like
pre-assume that she's
the.
going to cheat on you, even though she gave
No,
you
not to
no like.
pre-assume that she's going to cheat on me, but to find out if she's the type of person that would do that or not. It's simply like by
How do you
finding out
do
like
this
if they have red flags
investigative
or
work?
not.
How do you vet someone who is an abuser?
Well, it's the same way you'd vet any human being. You'd get to know them, you'd talk to them, you'd try to see if you could meet their family, get them to meet your family, get different opinions on them
I
or
mean,
something.
sure,
And
you can do that, but
maybe
like no
they're
abuser is just going to like flat out like come out to you and like be like, oh, I'm abusive, by the way. Like, even if you talk to all their family, they could show you all good signs, be really sweet to their mothers and sisters and caring and gentle. And then, like, all of a sudden, one day you do something and the switch flips.
But you guys are looking at it in like a scenario like this guy's the perfect abuser or something, and he can just manipulate everything and do whatever. But my point I'm trying to make is like in most cases, I'd argue there's different red flags. There's different things that happen that you're able to tell, like if they're that type of person or not. In some cases, yeah, you might get manipulated 100% of the way, and they might just trick you 100% of the way and whatever. And I feel bad for people that happen, and if that does happen in like a scenario. But in most cases, there's different red flags. There's different things that people see
Really,
and they
you
ignore and
can't
they go through it
source.
anyways. So it's just
You
like,
can't source. Where are you getting this from? Where are you getting this from?
what do you mean? Give you like a source of what?
Your opinion. Like, tell me where you have come to this conclusion from.
Well, like what I've seen, and there's also statistics stating that, like, well, like you said themselves, women will try to leave 5 times or something or whatever. And I've heard another statistic that, and only heard it from TikTok, so at the same time, I can't say that this is 100% true, but this is how I formulated my opinion, came to my opinion. Another woman that was talking about similar stuff was saying that someone would, like a woman would go through like 6 or 7 traumatic things like in a relationship before she truly actually leaves or like leaves the relationship. So I understand how you guys say, oh, well, she's a victim. She went through 6 or 7 traumatic things and then she left. And yeah, but at the same time, like when you see the first traumatic thing or you see the second or you see the third or you see the fourth, like there are negative things happening to you. You should tell yourself, like I'm better than this. I'm not worth this. Like I shouldn't stay in this, but
That
instead
right there tells me
stay.
how little you know about this scenario, because it literally changes the brain to where it's not a conscious choice. An abuser isolates and conditions their victim to think that they cannot survive without them. So they are in constant survival mode.
And you believe that there's basically no way out. You believe that anytime this happens, it's 100% just like a flip is like a switch is flipped, and then you can't get out of it, and it's done,
I'm
and you have to
saying
wait
that
until.
essentially it's kind of like a ball of yarn. Something has been wound over and over and over and over. And to undo that, you have to unwind it. It's not just a one choice, you're done with it. It can take years of therapy, treatment. That's why on average, it takes a victim 5 times to leave their abuser because of the grip that they have on them.
And you don't necessarily believe that, like I don't like. It's just hard for me to wrap my head around it, but it's not like it's not in any way like the person's fault that chooses the person that ends up doing negative things or treating them negatively or anything like that. Like, for example, me, if I were to pick a woman and I think she's the best woman,
Yes, what
she
you're
has
doing is
all the
victim
best
blaming,
things,
and
and then she turns out
I'm
to
honestly saying it.
be.
No, I don't think it's in any way the person's fault. Like, if you make a friend with somebody who seems super normal, seems like the best person in the world, and then one day randomly they decide to like burn you with a torch, I don't think it's your fault because you chose to be friends with them in the first place. I think it's their fault because they're a psycho and decided to burn you with a torch.
Okay, and then just with that scenario itself, do you believe that it would be a random one-off? They just up and torch you one day, or do you believe maybe that friend might have showed said signs or showed different things along the way, or you just think that every time any abuse happens, it's just a like a switch is flipped and that's it?
It can be both. I mean, it can be two scenarios. It can be like one time you really set them off and the switch is just flipped, or it can be like they start like burning you with a lighter and then they like get more progressive. But like she said, you are conditioned to think that you cannot leave and that you need this person to survive. It is very hard leaving like these domestic abuse cases.
I can like I can understand that like it could be hard to leave or that you can get into it, but what I can't understand is that like it's 0% at fault for like choosing this person unless it would be a scenario like you said, like it would just be a up and torch one day.
Wait,
But
so
like
you think if somebody like for example, if we became friends, I was super normal, and let's say I did burn you with a lighter like one time, and then the next time I decided to like give you third degree burns with a torch, do you think that you're somewhat responsible for those third degree burns?
no, because this is also a scenario where different things don't like if you were to slightly burn me with a lighter as like a joke or something like that, and we're just friends chilling or whatever, and then you pull out a torch next time we hang out and do that, I wouldn't necessarily look at it as my fault. But if we're hanging out
Right.
and you're talking to me and you're like, yeah, I like to burn sometimes people sometimes for fun, and then we're hanging
Wait,
out
but no
another time and you're
abuser. Wait,
like,
but no
this
abuser
or
is going
that
to
or
tell you,
whatever,
yeah,
and
I
say
like
this
to
stuff or do this
abuse
stuff.
people
Yeah, I would
sometimes,
like to
but they're
give I
going.
would like to give you a better analogy. Let's say that
If you
I told you you were going to get on a plane with me and we were going to go to Hawaii. And this plane crashes in the wilderness and now you are stranded. Is that your fault?
no, but
Do you
that's a
think that
one-off. So
maybe
okay, yeah, exactly. Like just
no, this
extrapolating on
is
that,
an analogy.
what
This is an
percentage of
analogy.
the
How
planes are
you
gonna crash? So like
that
like
doesn't
obviously it
matter.
wouldn't be your
That
fault
doesn't
if that
matter. You're
one-off
focusing on
scenario
the
happened, and
wrong
I'm not
thing so
blaming
that
anybody
you
for a
don't
one-off
so that
scenario.
you are literally being willfully ignorant. That's my whole point, is that in this scenario, the plane represents the relationship. And I'm saying, this is where we're going to go. We're going to go Hawaii, which I portray as like a happy, wonderful place. But then guess what? They crash the plane in the wilderness. Someone is stranded. When you have thousands of miles of wilderness around you, you can believe that if you leave, you will die because you don't have the resources to survive, which is why you stay in the spot that you are, hoping someone will save you.
Yes, 100%. And yes, if that was the scenario you're talking about, I would 100% agree and understand that. But if you're in a scenario where you're living in,
That's what
just the
it's like
West, you
to
can
be.
call 911, you can go talk to someone, you can go do. I understand it's hard to do and it's not necessarily easy, but if you have all the different resources and stuff like that versus being out in the wilderness and stuff like that,
Wait,
like
but how
I
are you
get it. But
Yeah,
supposed
like
to
yeah.
call
the
He
scenario
makes
911?
you're
plans,
using is
he makes
just
bail.
off because
He comes to kill you. Yeah, great.
Yeah, like how are you supposed to call 911? And let's say the person is like verbally abusive. How are you supposed to prove that this person is verbally abusive?
okay, let's say this person is verbally abusive and they continuously verbally abuse you. You could put your phone in your pocket and have a voice
Hmm.
memo open and just walk around. Wait
Yeah,
for
but
them
there's
to
states, but
maybe you might record the voice memo for a while, but it will come out eventually.
you're right. But there's states actually that don't allow you to use like recordings of people when they don't know that you're recording them in court for like trials
Yeah,
and
there
stuff.
are
Like, for
two-party
example,
consent states.
exactly. Yeah, there's two-party consent states where if I don't tell you that, like, if I don't get your consent to record you, either like video record, audio record, I'm not allowed to use that in court against you, even if it's like incriminating.
So then is that a problem with the system or is that a problem with the relationship?
Wait, that's a
Both.
problem with both, though, because if the system is set up against you and you're saying, well, it's your fault that you didn't leave, but the system is set up against you so that way it's hard for you to leave, is it really their fault or is it the system's fault?
Well, it's not. I'm not saying. Yeah, it would be like the system's fault for not providing like a good structure for you to be able to be safe. But that would be again in another scenario where you're saying, oh well, some states do this, some states do that. So let's put ourselves in a state that doesn't do that to benefit me because it's what works for this scenario. But if you were to go in an outside state, it would work. Or if you were to go in somewhere like Canada, like where I'm from, it would work. So I get that you're saying, yeah, maybe if they lived in this state and that happened and all the stars aligned, then it would be bad. But if they didn't, like there would
I
be
think you are so detached that you can't understand this. Like, you can't understand the fear of calling the cops and that he will be arrested. But then guess what? You just made him mad. And now he goes to jail. And guess what? Now he makes bail. And now he has access to you.
so you don't think that like you could get a restraining order or anything like that? You don't believe that like those
Yeah,
things exist?
what does a restraining order do? Like, so when he comes around, what? I throw a piece of paper at him?
No,
Like if
you
somebody's
call
going
you
to break a
call the
law, they're not
police.
going to care. If somebody is
Yeah,
going to break
Nicole
a law and like
Simpson
put
had
their
a
hands
restraining
on
order.
you
That did her a lot of
and
good.
abuse you, a restraining order isn't going to matter.
So like you guys just like I just don't get it. Like I just like how do you just always revert to like the the worst case scenario? Like you don't believe any scenarios. There's like you could
Sure,
see
there
signs
might
and
be.
just
You
ignore
are
them. You don't
victim
believe that any
I
of the
do not
things.
understand how in this entire conversation you have said she can do this, she can do this, she can do this, she can do this, but you have not said one thing about him, about the abuser,
Because you got
about
we're
his
putting it in a
actions.
scenario. You're putting it in a scenario where the man's an abuser, where the man's of this, where the man's of that, where the
Right,
person's
and you have not said
same ways
one
where
thing
I
about it.
said because he's an abuser, what are you supposed to do with an abuser? You're supposed to leave. You're not supposed to like you can't fix someone that doesn't want to fix themselves. You can't help someone that doesn't want to help
Yeah,
themselves.
but the issue is these cases that we're
This
talking about to you are the overwhelming majority. Like we're not just pulling in like a 1 in a million like case where this like the stars are aligned, blah 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 blah. This is actually the overwhelming majority of cases that go on with abuse and assault. So like for you to expect the situation to be completely like you said, stars aligned, and for her to be able to just get up and go and start a new life, and like he's not going to bother her, abuse her anymore, that's very rare.
Yeah, I don't know why you just don't like make the argument that maybe men should be better.
no, like if I were to make if I were to come in here and say, oh well, people shouldn't abuse people, men shouldn't abuse people, women shouldn't abuse people, nobody should abuse anybody. We should all live. There should be world peace. Who am I arguing with? I'm not arguing with anybody. Like we all agree on that. Like I don't think that any man should abuse any woman. I don't think that they have any right to do that, and I do
Well,
believe that
you're
they're at
giving
fault,
her
and it
a
is a
lot of
bad thing to
accountability
do.
for his abuse.
No, and see, this is what I don't understand is like you say like don't pick like, and this is the thing is like my point of view is you should try your best to pick the right person to go around your family, to go around your friends, to try to like bring them around, vet them, and make sure you're making the best like choice. If that and if you see any red
Right.
flags or you see any
And
bad things, you should leave. If all of those things don't happen and like they meet your family and it's great
your
and they have no red flags and everything aligns and they treat you perfectly and they just switch flips and then they turn into abuser, I don't believe that that is your fault at all. I don't believe you should like have any accountability for that because that's not your fault. We agree on that. But the only point, like the point I'm trying to make is if you ignore like certain said red flags or if you
Your
don't like
lens
use your
is a part of the
opportunities to
problem.
like
Your
get
own
out or to
thought
like do
process
different things
in
you can, and
regards
that's
to this is a part of the problem. You are a part of this problem.
for what thinking that men shouldn't abuse women and that women should
No, for
choose good
blaming
men to treat
victims for
them
their
good.
abuse.
I don't blame victims for their. This
You
is the
do.
thing I don't
You have
understand. Is
been
like if I'm
victim blaming your entire stance.
see you guys call it like victim blaming, but like what I would like refute is like you guys just have a victim mindset. You guys just say like just victim, victim, victim. I'm the victim. It's everyone else's fault but mine. It's all the whole
So,
world. Nothing's
is
wrong with
a
me.
woman who
I don't
is
need to do anything. It's
abused
all the world. It's the
a
rest. Like
victim?
pardon?
Is a woman who is abused by her partner a victim?
A victim of abuse, yes.
Then why are you blaming her for the circumstance of her life?
I'm not See, this is I'm not
You
blaming
should pick a
anybody. I'm
better
saying
partner.
moving
You
like
should do this. You should record him. You should do this.
okay,
And
so
he literally just said we
no.
all
This
have
is
like a
okay. This is the
victim
thing that
mindset.
I'll never understand. This is how I know it's like a victim mindset, 100%. For me, giving different resources you could do. This isn't me blaming them. This is just me giving different options you could do. For me to say, well, moving forward, you should try to pick a better man. You should try to pick someone who's not an abuser. That's probably the best advice you could get. What am I going to say? Oh, go pick the same guy. If you see a guy, he looks the
No,
same,
you're
dresses the
gonna
same, acts
say
the same, pick him.
men
That's good
should
advice. No,
do
I'm saying you need
better.
to pick a better
That's
man.
what
You
you're
need to
gonna
do
say.
better. You need to
Men
try
should
to
do better.
look for
It
different
was
things. Like this
not
is the
her
thing I don't
fault.
understand. You say, "Oh, you're blaming
You
because
are.
you think that she
You,
should pick a better guy." You're blaming her. No, I think moving forward,
you
nobody
are.
should pick a abuser. Somebody should pick someone that's going to treat them properly, that's going to treat them good. So I don't understand how that's a victim blame to say, "All right, like moving
You
forward."
don't. You will never understand because you don't believe it.
I'm not. This is the thing I don't necessarily understand. Like you just keep trying to shame me or say, oh, you're just blaming. You're just trying to,
You
you
should
know,
be
have
ashamed.
accountability for
You
the
should
abuser
be
or whatever. You're
ashamed of
just trying to.
yourself because anything that you say that takes the focus off of the abuser and puts it onto the victim is victim blaming. And I don't know why you would do that. Like, do you think that a woman dressing provocatively is like in any way responsible for getting essayed?
No,
Perfect. So why does a woman entering a relationship bear any responsibility for being abused?
I don't believe. Okay, a woman.
Oh,
Oh, he was kicked
by TikTok or like by a mod?
by a mod.